what you can see then, New Labour do right from the beginning is to strip power away from Parliament, that's away from people you can control. And it goes in two directions. First of all, it goes to expert bodies, quangos, quasi-autonomous, non-governmental organisations. The most important is the Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of England, which has scandalously mismanaged both the public finances, the currency, and particularly the sale of government debt in a shocking fashion since it acquired full independence. Then there is English nature, which is, of course, responsible for bat tunnels, £100 million tunnels to protect 3 or 4 bats. You know, just with HS2 deranged, and still worse, of course, the Climate Change Committee, which, if you were in on climate change and you were a friend of John Selwyn Gummer, you made a fortune out of it at the expense of the vast subsidies that lead to us paying 4 times the American price for electricity and the entire structure of our industry collapsing. And do you know how many of these quangos we've got? 444. The executive of any one of them, the tiniest paid some hundreds of thousands, the biggest paid 2 and 3 million, and between them controlling more than a third of state expenditure. That's in excess of £500 billion a year, not a single penny of which you control. Not a single one of them can you remove. Now, I know it's a problem, isn't it? When you say government by experts, doesn't it sound a good idea? There's a great Greek philosopher, Plato, thought about this. And you know what? He thought there should be ruled by experts. Again, at the end of a meal, I always say it's really appropriate to tell the story of Plato's great rival, who is Aristotle. And Aristotle, some of you will remember Gilbert and Sullivan, in fact. I imagine, as we are conservatives, lots of us remember Gilbert and Sullivan and that wonderful line in Iolanthe that every boy and every gal that's born into the world alive is either a little liberal or else a little conservative. But if you're interested in philosophy, you're either a Platonist or an Aristotelian. And Aristotle has got completely the different view about politics. At the end of a meal, it's very appropriate. He gives this wonderful analogy. The judge of the quality of a meal is not the cook, is not the expert, it's the eater. It's the person actually eating the meal. So, but we've got a really good example of the disaster of single-issue committee, which is COVID. We were ruled by a single-issue committee during COVID. It was even given this marvelously Platonic name, SAGE, the Scientific Advisory Board Executive, or whatever it was called. And ladies and gentlemen, there were quite decent people on it. There were also loons like Neil Ferguson of Imperial, who continued to gave wrong statistics on foot and mouth, gave wrong statistics on BSE, and even wronger ones on COVID. But there were people like Paul Nurse and whatever. But ladies and gentlemen, that expert committee had one purpose: to stop anybody dying of COVID. Do you know what? It didn't matter if you died of a heart attack. In fact, it was positively welcomed because you'd shut down the entire NHS and you'd turned it into a national COVID service. And by the way, can we all just be clear of the absurdity of this? Many of us are relatively elderly, would have been prime targets. What was the average age of death from COVID? 82. 82. What is the average age of death? 81. Get COVID, live longer. And think about it. This absurdity, what did we do? We destroyed the educational chances of 3 generations of school children, even though they had no chance of catching the disease. We did even worse. To have furlough, we bankrupted ourselves. We incurred the costs of a major war, literally the costs of a major war. And then finally, we destroyed the habit of work. So that's the result of single-person government. And then the final thing you do is you heave off government away in the other direction, experts in the one hand, and to lawyers on the other. And this is the other catastrophe. Traditionally, law is under Parliament. Parliament makes law. The judges are the lions under the throne. No longer. Judges have got ideas above their station. They've invented this thing called the Supreme Court. They've reinvented the idea of the rule of law. And above all, they've introduced catastrophes like universal human rights or European human rights. Now, they sound lovely, don't they? This is the problem. The left has captured language. I call human rights Paddington Bear. It's Paddington Bear political philosophy. You can just see human rights. They've got a little sort of red, sort of squashy pork pie hat, a pathetic little handwritten label round their necks saying Peru. They always lisp, of course, so it's Peru. They've got a little battered suitcase, and everybody waxes, wet and whatever. You know exactly what I'm trying to say. But ladies and gentlemen, universal human rights are a catastrophe. They're invented to destroy states. They lead to dispute between rival groups. And above all, they are designed to be anti-democratic. Think about it. If you believe that there are universal human rights, you believe there's a universal human being. You believe that somewhere we're all the same. Deep down, we're all so of course, the Afghan refugee, may have had a bit of a rough experience. He may do the odd little bit of rape and pillage. But by the time he's settled down in Purley and the odd little girl has been sort of taught local habits, he'll be just like the rest of us. The lunacy, the insanity. But it's worse than that. If you believe in universal human rights, there should be no states. There should be no borders. There's no difference between the citizen and the foreigner. There's no impact of history. There's no impact of tradition. There is merely abstract equality, that deadly thing that Disraeli talked about. So that's what's happened with universal human rights. And their immediate impact is brilliantly summarized by the man largely responsible for this, the last law lord, the last senior law lord, Tom Bingham. And he puts it safely in Australia, it has to be said, as follows. Human rights law, and I'm quoting, human rights law is anti-democratic insofar as it is counter-majoritarian and designed to protect minorities at the expense of the majority. And then he goes on and he lists the minorities, beginning with the mentally sick, Rudakabana, Kalokane, the people who should be in secure mental hospitals, not performing acts of horror. We, ladies and gentlemen, went along with all of that. The Cameron government declared itself the heirs of Blair. It is under Cameron that we introduce non-crime hate incidents. It is Theresa May who legislates net zero. It is under Theresa May and Maria Miller that the beginnings of gender self-identification take place. Until the Conservative Party does what the Conservative Party did with Keith Joseph and Thatcher, recognise its sins, repent, and explain why. Fun though this lunch has been, we are wasting our time.